Hello, my name is Ellie Steele. Welcome to the Introduction to the Emotional Freedom Techniques. This is just a basic 1-hour presentation. I give this presentation in various locations just to teach people a basic overview of where the points are and how to do some tapping and how to get started with EFT. So I'll start by describing a little bit about myself and how I came to be an EFT practitioner. So I started as a holistic nutritionist. I struggled personally my whole childhood and early adulthood with body image issues, emotional eating, low self-esteem, not being able to get myself to do what I knew I should do, right? Or what we're supposed to do when it comes to fitness and health. So I dealt with a lot of kind of emotional pain and low self-esteem stuff. And that drove me to become a nutritionist, because when you're trying to change your body, it's really common for people to think, I just need more information. I just need to learn more about nutrition. And then I became a personal trainer because that seemed like the obvious next step. I needed to learn more about fitness and figure out, what's the right exercise for me? What's the right diet for me? What's going to get my body to respond favorably? So I became a nutritionist, then I became a personal trainer. And then I went on from there. It ended up with energy work and mental health and that sort of thing. So when I was doing my training for holistic nutrition, one of the textbooks is called Frontiers of Health. And it was a textbook in the Body, Mind, and Spirit course. So just for anyone that's not familiar, holistic nutrition is quite different from mainstream nutrition or dietetics. So in holistic nutrition, we're looking at the entire organism. It's a body, mind, spirit approach. We're looking at foods that heal the body. We're not just looking at calories in, calories out, and fat grams and protein grams, and kind of the mechanistic approach to food. We typically don't use the food guides. There's often some controversy around using the food guides from a holistic nutrition point of view. So if anyone's ever been to a naturopathic doctor or even an alternative medicine practitioner of any kind, the type of nutrition that you would get from them would be more in alignment with holistic nutrition. So that's what I'm talking about with holistic nutrition. So it had a course. There was a course in my program, the Body, Mind, Spirit course. And in that Body, Mind, Spirit course, there was a textbook, Frontiers of Health, that talked about the metaphysical causes of disease. Now, the metaphysical causes of disease, meta beyond, so the beyond the physical cause of a disease. And so she was highlighting and talking chapter after chapter about cases, her own cases, this woman is a doctor, of finding mental, emotional causes for physical pain, physical deformity, physical disease. And it was, when I read that book, it was like someone turned on the lights, or someone just reminded me of information that I already knew. I don't know if you've ever had that experience where you remember something as you're reading it instead of it feeling like it's new information to you. I don't know. I don't have any explanation for that. It's just that's how it felt for me. So as I was reading it, it was like, oh, this is information I already knew, and I just needed a reminder. So it all kind of sparked from that book into the metaphysical and mental, emotional, whole body approach to healing. So I started off doing holistic nutrition with people, working in my practice. I've been in practice since 2001. And it wasn't very long before I realized that just giving someone a bunch of diet advice and a boatload of supplements usually wasn't terribly effective because most of the time people couldn't get themselves to follow the diet. And I understood that because I had difficulty following any kind of healing diet, particularly when it was for weight loss. I found that really hard, and I find that a lot of my clients find that difficult. Doing it for health sometimes is a little easier, but it just wasn't working for people. And I knew it wasn't working for people because it wouldn't work for me. So I was seeking, constantly looking for answers. And I found EFT actually through a diet book. So ironic, right? So there was a book, it was a Dr. Mercola book, and it was called The No Grain Diet. And this would have been, early 2000s. And I read it. He didn't allude to it being EFT. He didn't say what the technique was called. He just described it in the book. And I tried it, and it didn't really work for me. So I want you to suspend belief if you find that you try EFT and it doesn't really work for you at first. I was in that boat too. So I tried it and I was like, this sounds great. I wish it worked for me, and it would work. It would take the edge off of craving, but the craving would just come right back again. Now, I happen to be pretty high on the susceptibility scale for food addiction or emotional eating. Whether you call food addiction a thing or not, it's not clearly defined at this point. But it makes it so that it's a little, I think, harder for me just from a genetic perspective, and maybe that's just programming, I don't know. But for me, I find that the emotional eating, addictive eating patterns were bigger. They were way bigger than just a little tapping was going to solve. And I find that with a number of clients, not all clients. Lots of people do really well just tapping on cravings and it goes away. Didn't work for me. So I kind of put it on the shelf, forgot about it for a long time because I didn't even know what it really was. And then it came across again. So somehow I saw something probably online about EFT, and then I saw it again, and then again. And when you see something 3 times, you start to pay attention. I don't know if anyone else is like that, but if I see something 3 times, like, oh, okay. What is that? So I started looking into EFT, and that's when I learned it through Gary Craig. So Gary Craig is the founder of EFT, the inventor of EFT, and his daughter Tina Craig kind of picked up the torch for a little while there. So the pair of them created some educational programs, and I did all of the training through Gary Craig. And then when it came time, EFT had a bit of an organizational shift. I had to choose an organization to align with. I wanted to align with the organization that was aligned with Gary and Tina Craig. So that's why I ended up with ACEP, so the Association of Comprehensive Energy Psychology. And they have a sister organization in Canada called CATE. So I'm aligned with ACEP as an advanced certified EFT practitioner now. I did my grandfathering with Tina Craig, which was amazing because she's a fantastic teacher and really helped me hone my skills in EFT. So that's my basic story. So now let's just move on here and we'll go into our disclaimer. Okay, so here's our disclaimer. Because you're taking responsibility for your own health here, you're tapping along with the video, I do want to make sure that you're safe. So if you are dealing with any kind of serious disorder of thought, clinical depression and anxiety disorder, or anything else where you should be under the care of a licensed mental health professional, I am urging you now to do that and be cautious with EFT. So applying EFT on your own is certainly applicable, but you just want to make sure you're doing it safely. So EFT has 2 applications. So there's this emotional regulation, stress reduction application of EFT, and that's what you're going to learn today. So this is kind of basic, just tapping. It's not much different than a meditative practice or a breathing practice. So in that way, it's very safe. The other application of EFT is something that you would get from someone that's trained. So someone like myself, or if you have serious mental health disorders, you want to be with someone that's licensed. So I'm not a licensed practitioner because I'm a holistic health coach. For example, I mean, I'm not a psychotherapist. I'm not a therapist of any kind. I am a social service worker, but that doesn't qualify me to be able to do kind of intense traumatic counseling. So if you do have some kind of serious disorder of thought, you are now being advised to seek out that competent mental health care. Okay, that's your disclaimer. Okay, so what are the emotional freedom techniques? Well, you'll see the pictures on your screen there. That's Gary Craig and his daughter Tina Craig. So Gary Craig invented EFT, and he adapted it from something called TFT, thought field therapy. There are lots of acronyms in this energy psychology world. And he simplified this other technique. It's basically a technique where you're tapping on the body. We assume that these are acupuncture meridians. That's what the evidence seems to suggest, that these are acupuncture meridians, or that was the original thought field therapy, was tapping on acupuncture meridians. And evidence research seems to bear out that we're tapping on acupuncture meridians. Tapping on these meridians while we hold some sort of focus, mental focus in mind. So it's a technique, a body, mind, spirit technique that allows energy to regulate, allows your brain to regulate. We have some theories about how EFT works and why EFT works, but that's all they are at this point, are theories. So you could say that EFT is experimental in nature, but there is actually quite a bit of research supporting the effectiveness of EFT, which we'll talk about in a second. Okay, so the idea is that we focus our awareness on the issue that we want to solve, and we tap with our finger points or fingertips on these specific areas of the body. So like I said in the last slide, it can be used as a self-help emotional regulation tool, so you can do this on yourself, or it might be used in a session with a clinician, and you're still tapping on yourself. Some clinicians will tap on you. I don't do that. I allow the client to tap on themselves, and you're being led through the tapping with a clinician, and you're kind of doing some digging and looking at where you might have some issues, or you're going through a tell the story technique, which we'll get to. Okay, that's the basic description of what EFT is: holding some kind of stressor in mind and tapping through the body, and then see how it fades away. Okay, the science behind energy psychology. So let me first explain. Energy psychology is a broad umbrella term, and EFT falls under the category of energy psychology. So there is a collection of research on energy psychology. EFT is the most well-studied of all of those different modalities, but there are a number of different modalities. So I alluded to that with TFT is one, thought field therapy. There's also one called TAT, tappus acupuncture technique. There's a whole bunch of them that have all these different little acronyms, but EFT most well studied. So that's the most important takeaway there. So I've never really needed the science to convince me that something works. But if you're the type that really likes the science and wants to go look at it, it's here. So you can go look at, this is ASAP's research page, a synopsis of the research, so that you can find this. The link is at the bottom there, energypsych.org. You just go to their research page and you can find that. If that particular URL has changed, then just go to energypsych.org and just look for their research page. But as of August 2021, there are now over 275 studies, review articles, meta-analysis that have been published in professional peer-reviewed journals. Over 70 of those are randomized controlled trials. Over 50 of those are clinical outcome studies. All but one of those studies show effectiveness. 99% of those studies show effectiveness. There are 5 meta-analyses. There are 55 systematic reviews, 12 comparative reviews, and we now actually have some really good fMRI studies showing changes in the brain after EFT. So what's happening? What do we think is happening with EFT? Let's talk about that for a second. So one of the things that we've seen in fMRI studies is cortisol drop. So cortisol is your body's stress hormone. So if a technique shows a drop in cortisol, that's a good thing. If nothing else happens, if that's the only thing it's doing, then that still makes EFT a very viable self-help tool. Because there's not a lot of ways to get your cortisol levels to drop like within 5 minutes. I mean, you can do some breathing, some meditation stuff. There's other ways to do it, but EFT is certainly an effective tool to do that. One of the things I like to point out about the research of EFT, a lot of people consider EFT to be in the pseudoscience category. So I like to just address that or speak to that for a second, because like I said, for me, the needing the research has never really been that important. It's nice to have it. It's lovely that it's confirming kind of what a lot of us have already known, people that have been working with it. But when you see the outcomes, when you see the results of EFT, you don't necessarily need the science. But for someone that's new to it, the science can certainly help. Understanding that there are clinical controlled trials, that people are studying it for PTSD, people are studying it for anxiety, people are studying it for food and obesity and overweight. People are studying it. The most recent one I read was a study comparing a music intervention versus an EFT intervention before back surgery, and showing that the EFT intervention was better than the music intervention. So to calm you and be relaxed. So, I mean, there's all kinds of studies like that and all these kind of little niches. So go ahead and have a look at that if you like that sort of thing, or if it's interesting to you. I would encourage you to go look at that research. So one of the things I like to say about it kind of being considered pseudoscience. So EFT is now actually accepted by the American Psychological Association as a continuing education for their members. So if they're a member of the APA and they want to learn EFT, that's applicable for continuing ed. And that took a long time. You have to have some pretty rigorous science to be able for the APA to approve you. And it took ASAP 5 years, 5 attempts in 5 years, I believe it was, in order to actually get that approval. So that's kind of a big deal. There's that stamp from the APA that says, yes, okay, our members can learn it, and we'll give them continuing ed for that. The other thing that I think is important is this idea that just because we don't have a good understanding of the mechanism doesn't mean that it's not working. And this seems to be a common refrain in the scientific academic community, is that if we don't have a good explanation for it, then it's not possible. Then it's dismissed. And I think that that's a mistake that science often makes. I mean, the really good scientists, the ones that I've read their stuff, say the best scientists are always trying to prove themselves wrong. But there's a lot of confirmation bias in science these days. So we're looking for things that confirm what we already know, instead of trying to expand what we don't know, or trying to expand our knowledge, right? Which is ultimately what we really should be trying to do with science. So, I mean, if you just think back in history, there was a time when we didn't know how gravity worked or what gravity was. But it was still working. It was still there. We could still see the impacts of it. We just didn't know how it worked or what it was. But it was there. And same with electricity. You know, before we were able to harness electricity and really understand how it worked, it was there. It was still there. It was still doing something, just because we didn't have a good understanding of it. And so I like to think of EFT and this type of energy psychology and any kind of vibrational energy medicine as something that we might not necessarily have the scientific tools to explain yet. That doesn't mean that there isn't something happening. That doesn't mean that there isn't something going on that we don't have the capacity to understand yet. So that's where I like for people to just kind of pause and go, okay, let me just try it. And see what happens, because it's harmless to do EFT on yourself. You're really just tapping with your fingertips. I mean, what harm can you do? And a couple of deep breaths, and a lot of people will try to explain that away as placebo. But if you work with it for a while, you'll also recognize that there's a lot more going on here than a placebo effect. I'm not discounting that there might be a placebo effect. A placebo effect is a real effect. And it's a very, very, very real psychological effect. And if that causes healing, then great. But that's not all that's going on here. There's actually changes happening in our brain, and that's not placebo. Okay, so that's the science of EFT, a brief synopsis. Okay, so where would we apply this technique? Where do we need emotional freedom? Lots of places, right? Emotional freedom is never a bad thing. But there's a concept in EFT, well, it's not just in EFT, but there's a concept that I use with my clients a lot that's important to understand. And it's this idea of childhood programming. It's this idea that from the time we're born, or even a little bit before we're born, because we're picking up mom's emotions and chemicals and hormones and things, even in utero, until we're about 7 or 8 years old, we're little sponges, right? We're little programmable little sponges that are learning about the world and about ourselves. We're creating our identity, we're making meaning out of things, and we're picking things up in the environment around us. And sometimes we get faulty messaging, or we come to false conclusions, and those things can create belief systems about ourselves or about the world that are faulty and limiting and get in our way. So a lot of the work with EFT, when you're working with someone one-on-one, or even as you get more advanced and working with it on your own, is reprogramming old belief systems that often were programmed in childhood. So the brain can't tell the difference very well between something that you're remembering, so an old memory, something that you're imagining, something happening in the future, or something that's happening now. I mean, it can tell the difference to a degree because of the physicality of your body, but when you're in your mind, it can't really tell time. And if you're deeply enthralled in the memory or in the imagery of the future, and you're having emotional responses to that, your brain, for all intents and purposes, thinks you're in it now. And when it comes to these old childhood programmings or old memories, let's just say old memories, not even necessarily childhood, but old memories where there was a learning and there was some sort of negative emotion associated with it. Those negative emotions trigger a stronger learning. All emotions will trigger learning, and emotions are often stored, memories are often stored with emotions. And we get memories locked in. Core memories get locked in with an emotional response. The negative ones that create any kind of a fear, fight or flight response, they're even more powerful because our evolutionary brain is kind of designed to look for things that are a problem, things to be afraid of, and those get flagged as being more important. So in particular in the child's brain, where you don't have full development yet, you don't have adult ration, logic, reason, that doesn't fully come online until 25 or even a little bit after that, you're really operating with an immature brain, and you're making conclusions, drawing conclusions, and creating the meaning from that event, whatever it might be, without your full capacity to think about it. And it gets locked in with an emotion, and then it just stays there. And it's locked in often for the rest of your life unless you can unlock it somehow. And if it's locked in with fear, or if it's locked in with an emotion, that can be very difficult for the brain to actually take that out of that section and be able to look at it with some rational logic adult thinking. It can be very challenging because we might know something cognitively or from a conscious adult perspective. We might know that we deserve to be loved. We might know that we deserve to be in a good relationship. We might know that we deserve to be healthy, whatever it might be. And yet there's this emotional response or behaviors or actions that are really saying the opposite and are creating the opposite. So it's, on one hand, you get this conscious mind knowing what you really want, and on the other hand, it's being driven by this old learning that often got instilled in your subconscious mind in your youth or as a result of negative emotions. Now, as we tap and release those negative emotions, the fear, whatever it is associated with that old memory, suddenly the brain is capable of taking that situation, that memory, and thinking about it with adult ration, logic, reason. Frontal lobes get involved, and now suddenly it shifts. And the perspective on it shifts, and it shifts permanently. So this is where you get really big results with EFT, particularly with old limiting beliefs and old memories that had emotional charges. So that's definitely one of the most applicable places and powerful places that we can use EFT. It's a little more advanced. So I just wanted to lay it out here for you as when you're working with someone with EFT, and this is why EFT is considered to be so powerful, because it has this ability to reprogram and rewire the brain. Now, I just did a really botched job on explaining what happens in emotions and the neurology of all of that. So that's the best that I can explain it with my limited understanding and information. So I hope that, if anyone's a neuroscientist listening to this isn't like, oh, that's horrible. Because I'm basing that on my own learning and understanding of how the brain works and what I see happen with EFT. So I apologize if that's, offending anyone. Okay. So this is another place that we can use EFT. Well, if it isn't the feelings I've been trying to avoid, because what do we do with hard feelings? We often repress them. It's really hard for us to face them. If you're dealing with fears, in particular fear, they can just be lurking back there below the surface, and we try to distract ourselves from them with all the things that we distract ourselves from fear and pain. Pain is another big one, obviously, grief and loss and things not going well in our lives. We try to push that stuff away. We try to pain avoid. We are wired to pain avoid and pleasure seek. So often the emotions get pushed down and down and down and down and down, and sometimes they show up in our physical body. They show up as a headache, they show up as tension in our chest, they show up as knee pain, they show up as back pain, they show up as migraines, they show up in any number of ways. They show up as not being able to fall asleep at night. They show up as just general anxiety. And so EFT is one of these tools that can help you actually pull that stuff apart safely, because it's calming the brain. When we know that it's reducing that cortisol level, it's reducing the signals to the fear centers of the brain, the amygdala, so that you can think more calmly, more rationally, more with your long-term adult mind, and you might actually be able to solve the problem, or you might actually be able to shift into a new perspective that allows healing to happen. So that's one of the most important applications of EFT too, dealing with hard emotions, particularly unresolved emotions. Okay, I apologize if anyone has like a severe clown phobia. I used to have a slide of a snake up here and I had to take it down because it scared too many people. So I hope the clown isn't too upsetting for you. If it is, we're going to tap in a second, so hopefully that'll calm down. So any kind of irrational, illogical fear, EFT is very good at helping the brain recognize that that's not a threat. That's just someone in a clown suit, right? But these fears, especially phobias, get programmed in typically because of some experience. Not always, but usually. Most people, if they have a phobia of a clown, for example, this is a prime example, it's because they saw a clown when they were little and the clown scared them. And so they developed a fear response to clowns. And you can develop a fear response to anything, absolutely anything. If there was negative emotion associated with it, your brain associates that thing with something to be afraid of. And that's one of the things that EFT can do, is help break that apart, so you are able to look at whatever that fear is from a rational, logical adult perspective. Okay, depression. So when I say depression, obviously in this case I'm talking more about low mood or a depressed mood, not clinical depression. If you're dealing, like we said earlier, with clinical depression, you want to make sure you're getting competent mental health advice and help, care. So if we're dealing with a depressed mood or a low mood, EFT can certainly help with that, because it helps with any kind of negative emotion. So ideally, you want to tune in to whatever it is that's contributing to the low mood, and if there's a whole bunch of things, you might have to pull them apart and do one at a time, and that's being more specific, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But EFT can be very helpful for any kind of low mood, of getting yourself into a better feeling space. So by the same token, stress, negative emotion, right? We can use EFT to help us deal with stress. So if you're in a stressful situation, you're dealing with a divorce, or you're dealing with any kind of job stress, relationship stress, anything that's going on in your life that's creating undue stress, that's a great application for EFT. It's also just good to just calm you at the end of a day. It's great for kids too. So if kids are being bullied or having a hard time at school, at the end of the day, you can have them tap through the points. One of the things that I've done with, I don't have kids myself, but I have worked with my clients' kids, is I rub their feet, because the acupuncture meridians repeat on the hands and feet. So I squeeze their little toes while we talk about whatever it is that's upsetting for them. And, you know, if nothing else, it's a nice foot massage for them, but I know that I'm actually stimulating those points, and I'm doing EFT on them while they're talking about, while they're tuned into the stressor. So that's a good little tip you can use for kids. Guys, using EFT for war trauma or any kind of PTSD is something that you would want to be working with a licensed mental health professional to do. That's a diagnosis. That's probably beyond where we want to go on our own with EFT. Some people do, they have great results. I'm just urging caution. You'd be better off working with someone that's trained if you're going to use EFT for war trauma or any sort of serious big T trauma. But there's quite a few research studies on using EFT for PTSD, and the Veterans Association in the US is actually I believe they've approved it. Don't quote me on that. I have to check it, but I know that they're in the works of trying to get EFT approved by the U.S. Veterans Association, and I do believe it's been approved now. Sleep issues. This is another application for EFT. So tapping to calm your mind so that you can get into a restful state. And by the same token, with meditation, if you're trying to create a meditation practice and you find you got monkey mind jumping around all over on you, a few rounds of EFT can help calm that and allow you to get centered, grounded, and you can fall asleep, or you can meditate, or you can just get, again, into that different mental headspace. Now, here's where we talk about the little t trauma. So we talked about big T trauma a second ago. So big T trauma in the kind of the mental health world would be like PTSD, or seeing someone die in front of you, or being in a war, or being a victim of war, being a victim of a crime, natural disasters, the really big hard things for humans. Those are what we call the big T traumas. Abuse of any kind is also in that category. Dealing with the little T traumas, like these poor little kids in their get along shirt, that might be something that we consider a little T trauma. I mean, they might look back on that in 20 years and consider that to be quite upsetting, or they might still have anger about something their sibling did to them. Even though it seems like it's not a big deal. And this is the thing with EFT when you're looking for these little T traumas, is we often discount them. And we'll say to ourselves, that was 30 years ago, that doesn't matter, I don't care. But before you just discount it, what we do with EFT is we go and we look, and is there an emotional charge? So if there's an emotional charge, if you get any kind of we call it a zzz, a zzz, so some kind of energetic reaction or an emotional reaction to a memory. So if you think about something from your childhood and you have any kind of negative emotion about it, then it's tappable. It should be cleared up because you have some unresolved emotion there. Now, things that contribute to be little T trauma could be literally could be anything, and this can happen in childhood or adulthood. The thing about it being childhood stuff is this when you're forming, this is when we're creating our identity, this is when we're learning about the world and about ourselves and basically every subject matter. So we're creating our belief systems at this time, and if we have these little T traumas that have the negative emotions, that's how that stuff gets laid into place and how limiting beliefs are formed. So literally it can be anything. It could be moving away from your best friend when you're in grade 3. It could be your sibling being born, mom going to the hospital and your sibling being born, and you get left with grandma and grandpa or a neighbor or something like that. It could be infidelity, either in your parents' marriage or in your own. It could be divorce, when you're 8 years old and your parents split up and you think, I'm 45 years old, how can my parents' divorce still be bothering me? But sometimes those things are stuck. They're still in there. Legal trouble, financial worries and difficulties, a job loss or even a job change, a hard pregnancy, a hard birth, a traumatic birth. These are all, that could be a big T trauma, but those could be in the little T trauma category. So, moving right along. Cravings. So we talked about this earlier on. Now, cravings doesn't just mean food cravings. This is one that I've used it for. I've also used it with clients on cigarettes, even some serious drugs, alcohol, gambling, shopping. So you can use EFT for any kind of craving. The most common one that people use it for is definitely food cravings. But you can try it on any type of craving because there's a mechanism in the brain, the craving mechanism in the brain, and EFT can help reset that mechanism. So I think we've pretty much covered this one, limiting beliefs, fears, and phobias. So those limiting beliefs are those often subconscious, until we start to look at them, belief systems that we hold about ourselves, like I don't deserve to make that kind of money, I don't deserve to have a good relationship, I don't deserve to take care of myself. Those kinds of things are false, We know their faults, we know they're limiting, and they're usually installed. We usually pick that stuff up and we create that programming. So this is a brilliant application of EFT, is to overcome those types of fears, phobias, and limiting beliefs. So this is a list of just a few of the things I've used EFT for with my clients and myself. So you can see the list is long and there's many more. This is EFT because it's working on the mental, emotional, energetic blocks. Really, try it on everything. That's one of Gary Craig's lines, is try it on everything. There's no harm in trying it and see what happens. There aren't specific applications for different problems, and this is a thing that newbies often, they make this mistake. You know, you see it on forums a lot where say, does anyone know how to do EFT for a headache, for example? Well, you can use chasing the pain on any kind of physical sensation. Chasing the pain is a technique where you just tune in to whatever the symptoms are, like specifics of the headache or whatever it might be. Where is it specifically? Is it in the side of your head, the back of your head, top of your head, tight band all the way around your head? Where is it? How big is it? What color is it? You use some descriptors, metaphors. It feels like an ice pick in my head, you know, that's kind of a really graphic description. Those things are the best way to be specific and to work on a physical pain. If you're talking about how do I use EFT for low self-worth, that's one of the things on this list, low self-worth or low self-esteem or low self-compassion, that's more longer term work. Of breaking apart the old limiting belief systems that are contributing to us feeling low self-worth, or collapsing old movies, old memories, the things that are creating the idea of self-worth. So the old memories where we came to some kind of conclusion that helped build the belief system. So it's collapsing that sort of thing. So it's not as simple as, I have this problem, what EFT do I need to do to fix this problem? When you get into clinical and high-level EFT, that's not how it works. It's every individual, and it's looking at the individual and figuring out, okay, what kind of things happened in your life experience that could be contributing to this problem, and then we go from there. So just know that it's not as simple as, I just need a script, I just need to know what to say to deal with this problem. That's not the most effective use of EFT. It works sometimes, but it's not the most effective use. Okay, so let's get into the meat of how to do EFT. So the first step is to identify what it is you want to resolve. Sometimes it's helpful to say, is this a physical problem or is this an emotional problem? Sometimes it's both, and that's okay. So let's say it's a physical problem. Let's say it's the headache, like we were just talking about the headache. So that's a physical problem. It might have an emotional root. It might be coming from stress or something, but it's a physical, right now it's a physical manifestation. So it's going to be a physical problem. If it's an emotional problem, just to give an example, let's say it's you've had a fight with your spouse and you're upset about that. So you have some anger and some upset about that particular thing that just happened, that we could call that an emotional problem. Okay, so you want to make sure you're being specific enough. And this gets tricky, a little bit tricky. The more you know about EFT, the easier this is to understand. At first, one of the mistakes that people make is not being specific enough. So if we're talking about the headache, just tapping on even though I have this headache or I have this headache, that's probably not specific enough. You want to get detailed. So as I was talking about just a minute ago, what does it feel like? You know, use a metaphor. Where is it specifically? If it had a color, what color would it be? If it was a substance, what substance would it be? Would it be wood? Would it be metal? Would it be ice? You know, use those kinds of metaphors and those ideas to create language around the headache that you can use to tap on. Okay, and if we're talking about emotions, being specific with the emotion is, what did your spouse say? You know, so if you're in the middle of a fight, or you were in the middle of a fight and you keep rehashing a couple of things that they said, Pick one of those specific things that they said that really got under your skin, and then tap on that. And then you could do another one if you need to, but pick the one that really got you, and tap on that instead of just saying, even though I'm so angry at my spouse. So get in there and get specific. That's the best way to be more effective with EFT. Okay, so that's step one. Identify what it is that you're going to work on. Step two is gauge it. So how bad is it? Pretty simple. On a scale of 0 to 10, 10 is it's horrible, it's the worst it's ever been. 0 is it's not a problem at all. So with your headache, how bad is this headache? Is it a 7 out of 10? Is it a 5 out of 10? This is subjective. Don't worry about it too much. Just give it a number, because all it is a gauge for you to see what's happening with it. Is it going up? Is it going down? Pretty easy. Step three is where we formulate our setup phrase. So our setup phrase is this phrase. It's an acceptance phrase, basically. It's where we're acknowledging the problem, and then we're also saying that it's okay, basically. Not that the problem's okay, not that you want the problem to stay, just that you're okay even though you have the problem. So it's an acceptance. And this can be really valuable. Even just saying that can be really valuable. There's a validation in it. But when you add tapping to it, it's even more powerful. So the setup phrase always starts with the words even though. So even though I have this headache, but we're going to be specific, even though I have this pounding ice pick feeling in the side of my temple, my right temple, okay? See, that's much more specific than this headache. I deeply and completely accept myself. Now, the original EFT used the phrase, I love and accept myself completely, which is great. I use that all the time. It feels hard for people sometimes at first to say it. If it feels hard, but you can get yourself to do it anyway, because it will eventually become true and easy to say. And there's nothing wrong with being able to say, I love and I accept myself completely, and that just being true. It just feels a little weird, right? When you're not used to doing it, it's like, oh, that feels icky to say. So if it really, really gets to you and you really, really can't say it, then you can say something else. But as long as it's some degree of acceptance of self. I accept myself completely. I acknowledge this problem, but I'm okay. I'm okay just for now. Anything like that is fine. So that's the goal. Name the problem and say that it's okay on some level, or that you accept yourself even though you have it. That's step three, formulating the setup phrase. Step four is to tap through the points. So once you have your setup phrase, you would repeat that phrase while you tap on this first point. They call it the karate chop point. It's the side of the hand, so it's the meaty part of the palm. It's on the little baby finger side of the palm, and you're going to tap. I'm just going to show you here in this meaty part of the side of the hand. You can use one hand or the other. It doesn't matter. You're just going to tap while you say it. Now, I generally tap with 2 fingers. On this point, you can use 3 fingers. It doesn't really matter. These points are about the size of a tip of a pen. They're not very big. If you're in the general vicinity, you're going to get it. So don't worry too much about missing the point or not being on the point, as long as you're in the general area. Okay, so you would say the setup phrase while you tap here. So if we're using the headache example, even though it feels like there's an ice pick in my right temple, I deeply and completely accept myself. That's it. You only do it once. And then you tap through the points. So you're tapping through the points. So let's just go over the points first. So the top of the head point, if you take your thumbs, put them in your tops of your ears, and where your fingers naturally fall, where your index fingers naturally fall on the top of your head, crown of your head, that's the top of the head point. It's basically right on the very top of your head. Okay, and you're going to tap with 2 or 3 fingers on that point. And while you're tapping through these points, you're going to say the reminder phrase. Okay, we'll get to that in a second. So top of the head is the first point. Eyebrow is the second point. So it's the inside corner of the eyebrow. So it's right where your eyebrow begins. Again, either side. You can tap both if you like, but you don't need to. So you can just tap on the very beginning of the eyebrow. And then slide your fingers down your eyebrow into the corner of your eye. So there's a little shallow there. It's still on the eye socket, still on the bone, but very close to the corner of your eye. And you're going to tap there. That's the next point, side of the eye. and then you go directly under the eye. So if you're looking straight ahead, right underneath the pupil, again on the bone, you can feel a little divot in the bone there. You're going to tap there. And then under the nose, that one's pretty easy. On the chin, also pretty easy. Collarbone is one that a lot of people mess up. So if you don't have pronounced collarbones, if you can't see these round ends on your collarbones, you just kind of have to feel for them. So you can feel these bones right at the nape of your neck. So if you put your fingers right in the crook of your neck where you would knot a tie, and go down an inch and go over an inch either direction, you're going to be in the general vicinity. Okay, people tend to get like way out here or way down here. It's very close to the nape of the neck, so it's right in there where you would knot a tie, just an inch down and an inch over, so really close to the neck. Okay, so that's the collarbone point. Again, one hand, both hands, both sides, doesn't matter. And then under the arm, this one's also a little bit tricky. So if you take one hand and put it in your armpit, and take the other hand, if you have the flexibility to do this, and put it underneath your baby finger. So where your hand is in your armpit, take the other hand and just push there. That's your landmarking it. Okay, so now you've got the point. Now you take this hand and you tap. Okay, and again, either side. So for women, anyone that wears a bra, you can put your hand there and then just kind of go down onto the bra strap, and right where the seam of the shirt and the bra strap intersect, that's generally the vicinity. This tends to be a tender spot as well. There's kind of lymph that gets jacked up in here or built up, so it tends to be sore, and that's okay. Tap it and it actually works as a little bit of massage, and it moves that lymph around too. So if it's too hard to do the landmarking, you can just hug yourself and just go below the armpit a little bit and tap there. So again, one side, you don't have to do both sides. Okay, so that's all the points. Pretty simple. Okay, so when you're tapping through the points, we need to talk about the reminder phrase. So the reminder phrase is that little sentence, partial sentence, that you put in your setup phrase right after even though. So even though I have this, or I feel this, blank, whatever that was, that is your reminder phrase. So that is basically what you're tapping on, right? That's the problem. That's the thing you're trying to solve. So you say the reminder phrase while you're tapping through the points, and it's really just to keep you mentally focused on the thing that you're trying to resolve. So when we're talking about the headache, you're tapping through these points and you're saying this ice pick feeling in my right temple. Right? If that's the reminder phrase that we formulated, that's what you're going to say. This ice pick feeling in my right temple. Then you go to the next point. This ice pick feeling in my right temple. This ice pick feeling in my right temple. This ice pick feeling in my right temple. Feels like there's an ice pick in my right temple. This ice pick feeling in my right temple. It feels like there's an ice pick in my right temple. This ice pick feeling in my right temple. That's it. That's the whole thing. You just say the reminder phrase as you tap the point 7-8 times on each point, or just as long as it takes to say the reminder phrase is sufficient. You don't have to stay any longer. Just make sure you're doing at least 7 or 8 taps. Okay, so that's one round. Then we move on to this next slide, step 5. This is where we take a breath and we reassess. So I just like people to take a breath so that they can focus on the thing, whatever it is. You don't have to do the breath. So if you feel like you just want to assess it, just assess it. I just usually go, okay, all right, now what? How does it feel now? And by the way, just taking the breath, if you just did the breath work without the tapping, you can try that if you want, just to prove to yourself that there's something going on with the tapping, because just saying this ice pick feeling in my temple without tapping, you know, a bunch of times and then taking a breath probably isn't going to change it. Okay? So we're reassessing our original number, the 0 to 10. Did it change? Did it go up? Did it go down? Is it gone? So sometimes it's really hard to know if something's gone, and it'll be really hard the first couple times you experience something dropping to a 0 to accept that it's dropped to a 0, because we don't really understand the phenomenon of having something drop like that to a 0 when we know it was just there a second ago. So watch this in yourself, because you will try to justify it. You'll try to explain it, and it'll be like, oh, it must be because I was distracted, or it must be because, you know, whatever. That's what we all do. We all do that initially because we don't have any way to explain it. So we try to explain it because our brains don't know what to do with this. Something just disappearing like that. It's like, oh, I don't know how that worked. I need to somehow explain that away. So just suspend that. If you feel that you need to explain it away, just don't. Just go, okay, well, it seems to be gone, and see what happens, okay? So if your complaint goes up, that's fine. That happens sometimes. If it goes up, that doesn't mean it's gotten worse. I mean, the charge is higher, so yes, technically it may have gotten worse. But the very next round of EFT will probably drop it even lower than you started. So don't give up. If something gets a little bit higher initially, keep tapping. You can't do any harm with this. You can't tap in a headache. You can't tap in bad things. All you're doing is calming your brain. So if you don't get any result, or if you get something a little bit higher, it might be because you're tuning into it, but typically it will go down. If it goes up initially, keep going, it will go down. Or at least it'll go down to where it started. Okay? They don't go up and stay up. That just doesn't happen. Okay? So that's step 5. All right, so now you're going to learn it. We're going to try it. So we're going to do something called the constricted breathing technique. This is a great tool. You can use this anytime. It's good for stress reduction. It's good for before bed. You just use it as a self-regulation tool. So you're just using the breath, and we're going to tune into the breath, and we're going to see what happens. So you start by taking 3 nice deep breaths to stretch out your lungs as much as you can. So do that now. Inhale and exhale 3 times. So inhale. Just try to get as much air in there as you can. So we do that first to eliminate any possibility that improvements are from a stretching effect. So we tried to stretch it out as much as possible. Now you're going to take 1 more deep breath, and this time you're going to rate it. So on the scale. So in this technique, we flip the scale on its head. There's no other technique that we do this for. Almost always the 10 is bad and 0 is good or neutral. In this case, 10 is good. So 10, when you take a nice deep breath, is the fullest breath you can take. It's a really full breath. It feels easy. It just flows. There's no tension. There's no effort. It just happens. That's a beautiful 10 full breath. 0, call 911 because you're not breathing, right? So ideally it's not a 0. So you want to give it that rating somewhere on that scale of 0 to 10. And when you're gauging it, just see if you can feel, where is it tight. So it might be tight around your diaphragm. It might be tight in your chest or in your shoulders. There's probably going to be some kind of physical restriction or constriction, some kind of tightness somewhere that prevents the air from feeling like it's going all the way in and filling your lungs fully. Okay, so take your nice deep breath now, rate it on a scale of 0 to 10, and just see where it feels tight. Okay, you can write it down if you want to. You'll probably remember it, but sometimes it's helpful to write that number down. Okay, so now you're going to tap with me. And ideally, you're going to say these statements out loud. If you really are in a room where you don't want to say it out loud, or you can't say it out loud, then do it in your head, but it does work better if you're able to say it out loud, okay? So we're going to start on the side of the hand. We're going to use really simple language. You're just going to follow along with me. So you're going to tap, and you're going to say, even though I have this constriction in my breathing, I deeply and completely accept myself. Okay, now you go to the top of the head and you say the reminder phrase, this constriction in my breathing. Okay, and then you go to the inside corner of the eyebrow and remind yourself what you're tapping on, this constriction in my breathing. And then you go to the side of the eye, this constriction in my breathing. Then under the eye, this constriction in my breathing. Under the nose, This constriction in my breathing under the chin, or on the chin, under the bottom lip. This constriction in my breathing. And on the collarbone. So remember, it's very close to the nape of the neck. This constriction in my breathing. And last, under the arm. This constriction in my breathing. Okay, and now try it again. So take another nice deep breath. And see if there's any improvement. So A, check the number. So see if it's the same number, or see if it's gone up. Maybe it's gone down. And see where if there was tightness anywhere, see if that feels like it's different. It might have moved. Sometimes that happens. It might have been constriction in one area and now it feels like it's tight someplace else. Okay, so get your new number, new constriction if there is any, and we're going to do it again. So I recommend you do 5 rounds of EFT on whatever it is you're tapping on. Commit to doing 5 rounds. It doesn't take very long, couple minutes. If you're not getting anywhere after 5 rounds, leave it. You might just need a little bit of help. You might just, you might not be being specific enough, or there might be something else going on, and you just need to dive in there a little bit more. But if you're not getting anywhere with basic language, basic technique after 5 rounds, you can leave it, but don't give up before 5. Okay? So back to the side of the hand, we're going to do this again. Even though I still have this constriction in my breathing, I deeply and completely accept myself. Okay, top of the head. We're just going to change the language a little bit here. This remaining constriction. 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 This remaining constriction, this remaining constriction. Okay, take another breath. Let's see what's happening. Sometimes you'll yawn when you're doing EFT. Really common to yawn. That seems like a relaxation response. I can only assume. All right, round 3. Let's go. Get your new number. Feel where it's tight. Even though I still have some constriction in my breathing, I deeply and completely accept myself. There's still a little tightness in my breathing. There's still a little tightness in my breathing. This remaining tightness in my breathing. There's still some constriction. This remaining tightness. There's still some constriction in my breathing. Still a little constriction in my breathing. This remaining constriction in my breathing. Okay, try again. Excuse me. Okay. So your new number is, see if it's feeling any easier yet. Might just feel like that air is just flowing in there now. It might not be. So just suspend judgment if it feels like it's not working for you. Like I said, didn't work for me at first either, for the food craving thing. So don't give up. Okay, let's do it again. Even though I still have some of this constriction in my breathing. Deeply and completely accept myself. There's still some tightness in my breathing. Still some constriction in my breathing. There's still some tightness in my breathing. There's still some tightness in my breathing. This remaining constriction in my breathing. This remaining constriction in my breathing. This remaining tightness in my breathing. This remaining tightness in my breathing. Okay, try that. hope you're feeling some benefit there. Okay, we're going to do one more round, and this time I'm going to just use slightly different language. I'm just going to address the tight muscles of breathing, because very often the tightness in our breath is a stress response. You know, when we're stressed or upset, our breathing gets shallow. The muscles associated with breathing get tight, and sometimes they just stay that way. They're just always tight. So if we can focus sometimes specifically on those muscles and relaxing those muscles, sometimes you get an even better response. So this is something you can use anytime, again, on any muscle. So we're just going to focus it on the muscles of breathing and any tightness around those muscles of breathing. So anything in your diaphragm, around your chest, around your rib cage and your back, all those muscles that allow your rib cage to expand to get your lungs to fill all the way. Okay? So even though there's still some tightness in my breathing, there might be some stress in these muscles, I deeply and completely accept myself. There might be some stress in these muscles. Any of the stress and tension I might be holding in these muscles. Any of the stress and tension in these muscles. I might be holding stress and tension in the muscles of my breathing. My body might be holding on to this stress. Any of the tightness in these muscles. Releasing the tightness in these muscles. Acknowledging the tightness in these muscles. Okay, so let's try that. And hopefully you're feeling calmer, more relaxed, grounded, centered with the breath. I mean, if we just sat here and did some deep breathing for 10 minutes, you'd probably feel relaxed and calm too, but we weren't deep breathing the entire time. We were mostly talking and tapping. So it's a tool. If you really like deep breathing for 10 minutes and that works for you, great, you can use deep breathing. If that doesn't work for you and you've only got time to do a couple rounds of tapping and you can't kind of sit and focus on your breath, but you can do this, then do this. This is the application for down regulation, for calming, for getting grounded and centered. Okay, so I would say it's probably similar to deep breathing techniques in that way. EFT has this whole other clinical application though, but this is definitely a good way to use it. So we talked a little bit about cravings earlier, but I just want to give you a little bit more information about how to tap on cravings. So Peta Stapleton is a researcher, an EFT researcher, clinical psychologist in Australia, and she's the one that's been using the fMRI to work on obesity and weight loss and anxiety, a number of the things. She does quite a bit of really good research. So in her studies, she's shown quite effective results with EFT for weight loss and for food cravings. So let's talk about that a little bit more in depth. So this is a PubMed brief on the abstract and brief on the study, Peta's study. So you can see, you can read through that at your leisure if you like. In a 1-year follow-up, it showed that people that had done the EFT, they were losing about 1 pound a week in this 6-week course, and then they were continued to lose about 2 pounds a month in their 1-year follow-up. And there was no change after 1-year follow-up in PTSD symptoms. Anxiety, increases in happiness were non-significant. But it showed that the results in EFT really aided in weight loss and in food cravings. So what they did was they did 6 live teleclasses, so access to online course materials, private social media group, and a year of monthly support teleclasses. There was no particular diet. They just worked on controlling the emotional eating, using EFT to treat the emotional triggers associated with food. So they were just tapping on these foods. So that is a very effective use of EFT for a lot of people. So one of the things that I do with clients is I will do something like this. I will have them pull up images of tempting foods, or I will pull it up for them. So let's say chocolate is one of the things that they're really craving. We'll just Google images of chocolate and we'll try to find the one that looks the best, the most tempting to them. And then we'll formulate our setup phrase. So we can do this now. If one of the pictures on your screen looks tempting, I'm hiding the potato chips there. Sorry, my screen is over top of the potato chips. But you can kind of see a little bit of it. So if one of those foods, the bread and butter or the dessert or the chocolates or the potato chips, are something that you could create a craving for, you have a craving for just even looking at that image now, then I would invite you to tune in to that food and get a 0 to 10, and we're going to tap on it. So how badly are you craving that food? Okay, so if you have your craving for whichever food is on the screen there, I'm going to say the language, use the language around the chocolate, but if it's something else, you can just say what I say and think about the food that you're focused on, or you can change my language. So if you would rather change it as I say it, change it to whatever it is that you're looking at, then go ahead and do that. Okay, so we're starting on the side of the hand. You have your craving on a scale of 0 to 10, how badly we want to eat it. Even though I have this craving for that chocolate, I deeply and completely accept myself. I really want to eat that chocolate. That looks so good. I'll bet that tastes delicious. I bet you it smells delicious. That looks so good. This craving for that chocolate. I really want to eat that chocolate. If that was here in front of me, I would eat it all. Okay, stop there, take a breath. Rate it again. Look at the food. Don't skip foods. Don't change foods. Just focus on the same one. Give it another 0 to 10 rating. Has it changed any? Does it look any less appealing? Maybe it looks more appealing. Just gauge it, honestly. What is it doing? And we're going to tap again. Okay, side of the hand. Even though I still have the craving for that chocolate. Deeply and completely accept myself. I really want to eat that chocolate. The craving for that chocolate. The craving for that chocolate. That chocolate looks so delicious. It looks so delicious. My mouth is watering just looking at it. I really want to eat that chocolate. The craving for that chocolate. Okay, stop there, take a breath. Look at it again. Try to get your craving up. You're trying to get it as high as you can get it every time. How badly do you want it? It's starting to look different, maybe. It's interesting how it just starts to shift as you look at it. It's just, sometimes it just starts to lose its power. Might not be doing that yet. That's okay if it isn't. Okay? Let's get your 0 to 10. How badly do you want it? And we're going to tap again. Even though I still have this intense craving for that chocolate, I deeply and completely accept myself. I still have this craving for that chocolate. I still really want to eat that chocolate. That chocolate still looks delicious. That still looks delicious. I'm sure it smells delicious. My mouth is watering just looking at it. I still have this craving for that chocolate. I really want that chocolate. Okay, try it again. Give it another 0 to 10. I'm going to tap one more time. You can always go back and tap more. If it's not getting any better, do a few more rounds if you want to. You're still focused on the same food, even though I still have some of this craving. I deeply and completely accept myself. I still really want to eat that. I really want to eat that. It looks so delicious. My mouth is watering just looking at it. I still have this craving. I still have this craving for that chocolate. And if it were here, I think I would eat it all. I still really have this craving. Okay, stop there, take another breath. Now, even though I'm saying things like I still really have that craving, if your brain is going, no, I really don't still have that craving, that's okay. You're not going to tap it in. You're not going to create it. Just remember that. You're never going to create something unwanted. You're always releasing. We're never tapping stuff in. It's not how EFT works. We're just getting the brain to think of it differently. One of the things with cravings is that our brain is trained. It's trained from an evolutionary psychology perspective, and it's also conditioned because these foods are really calorie dense. They were really safe. Like sweet foods were safe from an evolutionary perspective. You could gorge on them when we were living in times when there was food scarcity and shortages. If you found a food that was sweet, you knew it didn't have poisons in it. So it's like, it's just, we are just kind of wired to eat a lot of carbohydrates. Like it's not a failing. It's not a personal fault. And I have to help my clients understand that. Like a lot of people really just have strong wiring, and then on top of that, conditioning. So, you know, chocolate in particular is associated with Easter, at least in our culture here in North America, with Easter and Christmas and Halloween and all these fun times. It's associated with good times and happiness and treats and, you know, all the good stuff that chocolate gets associated with. So we have these conditioned responses with food as well. And we also have all kinds of stuff to pull apart around food is love and food is reward. And, you know, there's all kinds of learning around food. So that's the kind of thing that I'm working deeply with clients on when we're pulling apart the reasons why we turn to food for comfort or love, or, you know, all the reasons that we turn to food in an inappropriate manner. So conditioning, evolutionary conditioning, lifetime conditioning, it's all part of the craving cycle. So what's happening in the brain is we're allowing the rational, long-term, conscious awareness to come online that says, I really don't want to eat that. Like, it's really not good for me. It's going to spike my blood sugar. It's going to do whatever it's going to do to me. There's no nutrients in it, you know, even though it's a nice treat. Because being able to eat this stuff occasionally as a treat is one thing. It's craving it and it creating kind of emotional distress is another, right? So I'm not talking about taking it away so that you never want to eat it again. That doesn't happen. It just helps you develop a more balanced approach to it, so it can take its rightful place in your diet, like a treat, you know, a healthy indulgence every once in a while. That's kind of how I think of it and frame it. Okay, I hope you found that helpful. So that is the end of our presentation today. And so here's a little bit more info for you on where to learn more about EFT. So professionals, if you are a mental health professional or you want to get certified in EFT, I would highly suggest you go look at energypsych.org. That's the Association of Comprehensive Energy Psychology. There is a Canadian sister organization, Kate, their website is there as well, and they do conferences across the country. There's usually a yearly conference. If it's just for personal interest, you just want to learn more about EFT, Gary Craig has a free tutorial. It's amazing. Go check that out, emofree.com. You might have to dig a little bit to find it because it's a little harder to find these days, but just look for the tutorial, EFT tutorial, and have a look through that. Of course, I'm always running courses. You can work with me one-on-one. You can find out more about my own tapping courses and programs at efttapping.ca, or you can always email me, ellie@evolutionwellness.ca. Thanks for joining me. I hope you learned something. I hope that was valuable. Have a great day.